Y'all, in big tech news, Rabbit AI, it turns out, has much bigger problems than MKBHD. Because the last time we talked about this company was because MKBHD called their R1 AI barely reviewable. With that creating this whole debate online for a while about negative reviews and, is MKBHD a bad actor? Which, just to make clear, he's not. He's reviewing, he's giving his opinion. That's what people want. But unfortunately for Rabbit AI, they are also on the radar of another huge creator by the name of CoffeeZilla, with him now putting out a video saying not only is the R1 flawed, but also alleging that it was built on a scam and shows a pattern of Rabbit failing to deliver on its pie-in-the-sky promises. Because before it was called Rabbit, Coffee claims that the company was originally called Cyber Manufacture Co., with that name change actually only happening 2 months before its official announcement.
And it turns out that name change is pretty significant because Cyber Manufacture Co. wasn't just like a shell company or the same company under a different name. They had separately raised venture capital for a completely different project. Not AI, it was for NFTs.
Right, so the NFT project was called Gamma, with Coffee noting that this was back in 2021 when NFTs were all the rage, with Gamma raising about $6 million. And Coffee going on to say that this whole endeavor is especially shocking to look into because in 2024, the company's CEO, Jesse, said that they would never touch crypto, never. And so when Gamma comes up, Jesse boils it down to a little COVID project that he did once, saying, NFTs were released, he bought some himself, but he left the project once it was open sourced. But looking into all of that, Coffee claims that Jesse actually made massive promises with Gamma, like promises of a Gamma-verse and plans to launch the first carbon-neutral or negative cryptocurrency. But these crypto coins or tokens, they weren't released, and Coffee claimed that the $6 million raised for the NFT project, it's just unclear if it went to Rabbit, somewhere else, or who knows. But he did say that all these issues tie back to the R1 device.
This project is built on the skeleton of that scam project. It's also because the R1 was overhyped in a similar way as a do-it-all device. But this same company isn't some historyless company. They have a history of abandoning investors like they did with Gamma NFTs.
Right, alleging that there is a pattern here because some of the Gamma promises were just huge. Like his carbon neutral crypto idea then turned into this plan where the NFTs would create a clean energy grid that people could then co-own that would produce coins. There were hopes for storefronts, comic books, brain logic controlled tools. It all kind of sounding insane, but Coffee also argued it's important to listen to this because the same CEO is trying to sell us the future of AI.
Look, I'm not here to stump for the bigwig venture capitalists who lost their faces on this. At the end of the day, these are both consumer-facing businesses. They got real people to invest real money into both the $200 Rabbit R1 and into this Gamma NFT project. Both are overhyped. One just already didn't deliver what they promised, while the other is working on fixing it.
With Coffee going on to say that Gamma NFT owners should get their money returned, estimating about $1 million worth of refunds and claiming that Jesse previously suggested this before. But also, notably for its part, the Rabbit team has responded to Coffee, saying there's no way to actually refund an NFT unless the owner agrees to burn the tokens on the blockchain. Also saying we don't agree with calling the Gamma project abandoned when it was open sourced and given back to the community in alignment with community feedback. Also further accusing him of taking Jesse's comments out of context and claiming that the $6 million in venture funding raised for Gamma was only used for the Gamma project. And with that, saying that they delivered on their promises by creating and selling NFTs, establishing an IP studio, and creating a sort of metaverse and open sourcing that project. With Coffee saying that the Rabbit team also denied Gamma ever promising a carbon negative coin, that it was just an idea. But Coffee maintains that they did promises and they just failed to deliver, even pointing to a video that they once released that said,
"Ultimately, our efforts will lead to the Gamma token, the first ever carbon-negative cryptocurrency powered by our sun. Together, we will create a sustainable future for all life on the planet we call home. Join the Discord today."
They're saying, sure, they did deliver some other things, but they weren't what they initially said they would do, nor were they nearly as big as their promises, especially when it comes to the carbon negative coin. With Coffee ultimately saying that he'll leave it to the viewer to decide who to believe here. Though notably, it also seems like this might just be the start of his efforts looking into Rabbit. Because last week he tweeted asking former or current employees of the company to message him. So we'll have to wait to see if anything comes from this. And in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts. And then in huge internet news, let's talk about the Try Guys. Because they just announced what every fandom loves to hear: change. Fans love change. Everyone knows that. I'm kidding. But so far, we are actually seeing a very overwhelmingly positive response, which you might not think would happen after, that whole Watcher debacle. But so far, varying levels of positive for each of the announcements. Or with the first being that they're launching their own streaming service, with Zach telling Rolling Stone, we're at a point where we find that our taste and our audience's taste is at odds with what algorithm, specifically the YouTube algorithm, rewards. And they elaborated on that in a video that they put out today, noting that YouTube is changing, which is fine. But because the algorithm doesn't always favor what their viewers want,
these are all layers that separate us and you. So moving forward, we're at a crossroads, right? We have two options. We can be successful on YouTube by making stuff that we and you guys don't truly love, or
we can slowly fade away into irrelevancy, making cool shit that the algorithm doesn't care about.
So they decided to pave a new road, which is why they announced their ad-free subscription streaming service, which is called Second Try. It's available worldwide, your phone, TV, other devices, but also notably with this saying they're not leaving YouTube.
And if YouTube is still the best way for you to watch us, we get it. So all the shows you're used to seeing here will still be here.
All of our shows will still be here, sometimes a little later, sometimes a lot later.
But on Second Try, you're gonna get early access to old favorites.
Ooh, uncensored content that YouTube won't allow.
Oh, exclusive new stuff just for you!
Or they'll have new content on their service as well as content that they greenlight from other creators. And it'll cost $4.99 monthly, or you get a discount when you sign up for a year. And also with all of this, there's the announcement that they're expanding their cast, which is then connected to the announcement I was most interested to see the reaction to, and that is Eugene. And with that, they told Rolling Stone that this upcoming season will be his last as he goes on to pursue other creative endeavors. And Eugene, for his part, said he's so proud of what the Try Guys have become and saying more answers regarding his future involvement are coming tomorrow. And so with all that, there's a question of, well, why is this being received so positively compared to Watcher, right? Especially as people are actively making comparisons. And while going through the reactions or looking at the likes to dislikes, not everyone is fully on board. You see a number of people saying, the service rollout from the Try Guys sounds a lot stronger and better for fans than what Watcher initially talked about. Top comments on the announcement saying things like, this was much better done than the Watchers who made their sad couch video like a boohoo or poor moment instead of, hey, we want to make stuff that YouTube thinks is a sin, do you want to watch it? Plus, they're looping their ticketed live shows into it as well, which is a nice perk for people who already pay for those. As well as, this is strong Dropout vibes, meaning they seem to be taking a page from the Dropout playbook. No restraints placed on them by corporations, company, create the content they want, not be stymied by the unreasonable, unfair, and inconsistent rulings of YouTube on what is and isn't allowed in a video, hiring, collaborating with friends, and other personalities. And regarding Eugene, one of the top comments saying, at least it's official. I feel like we've been getting ghosted for 2 years. This feels like finally breaking up officially. So the final thing I will say here is I wonder how many groups and creators out there saw the whole Watcher debacle and since then have had to go back and rework their similar announcements to off-platform subscriptions. Because make no mistake, the Try Guys are not going to be the last ones to do this, and if anything, it feels like a small part of a much bigger trend. And it's yet another example of sometimes it's not best to be the first one through the door or the first one through the door in a while. And then we'll get back to the news in a second, but I gotta say, I don't always have time for breakfast, lunch, a snack in the morning. I've got too much going on. But today's sponsor, Huel, they're here to help because Huel is no prep meals that don't compromise your health. Huel is ideal for me when I'm pressured for time, I'm on the go, I'm in a rush, or just away from the kitchen. I had a shake with cold water, and I have a convenient and nourishing meal in seconds. And personally, I love Huel's Black Edition. I think I'm the first person to say this, that once you go black, you just won't go back. It's a low-carb, high-protein powdered meal with 40 grams of protein plus 27 essential vitamins and minerals. It's plant-based, gluten-free, and has no artificial sweeteners. Plus, they've got tons of great flavors, though I love chocolate the best. Huel products, they're designed by nutritionists and dietitians to give your body everything it needs from a healthy meal in an extremely easy and convenient way. In short, the headline is you get a high-quality, nutritious breakfast or lunch for just $2.50 a meal. So if you want to save money, save time, and eat healthy, click the link in the description and use code PHIL15 for 15% off your first Huel order, plus a free t-shirt and shaker, which is a $40 value. That's code PHIL15 for 15% off your first order. Link in the description. Because having a busy life shouldn't stop you from eating healthy. So check out Huel today. And then let's talk about the tale of two states and what they're doing regarding children. And you'll notice one is much more controversial than the other, though we're going to start with the less controversial one. Right? And that's because Tennessee is about to become the first state in the nation to give families free diapers under Medicaid. So starting in August, parents will be able to go up up to the pharmacy and grab up to 100 diapers per month, totally free of charge for children under 2 years old. Though I will say, for those of you that haven't had children or you've never really been around babies, while that sounds like a lot, it's also not a ton. Babies under 2 years old, they're essentially 24/7 pissing, shitting, eating machines. In fact, I looked into this. On average, they'll use as many as 300 diapers per month. So while very beneficial, this program will actually only cover about a third of that. Though as they become toddlers, that number drops to around 150, which is also why Tennessee diaper banks hand out millions of diapers each year. And even with that, they can't keep up with the rising demand, especially as the cost has shot up since the pandemic, with families being seen spending over $1,000 on them over the year. And I mean, that's just for one kid. So you have the National Diaper Bank Network saying that nearly 47% of American families struggle to afford diapers in 2023. So what we actually often see is that because of that financial stress, parents will try to save money by conserving their supply, which, can mean leaving their baby in the same diaper for as long as possible, sometimes a full day or even longer. Which, that's just the setup for